In this video, you'll learn how to build an entire client portal, not with a bunch of tools, but all on Zapier. Most people don't know this, but Zapier is way more than automation. They've given you multiple products to be able to build tools and portals all in one place, which makes operations super smooth and admin work just a thing of the past. My name is Bryce Vernon. I'm a senior growth marketer at Zapier. I built out the Zapier template library that's used by over 144,000 different builders. I've worked with clients myself and have built out tons of different client portals. So I'm ready to take you on this journey so that you can become a Zapier builder. So here's the plan. I've broken this out into 9 different sections. You'll get an overview of what we're building and then 2 different types of portals. One is a simple portal, one is an advanced. I'll get into that in a bit. For each one, we'll cover tables and interfaces. We'll go into the interface settings and branding, and then we'll look at zaps and zap ideas to tie it all together. All right, let's jump in. When you're building a portal in Zapier, there's actually 2 different routes you could take. You could take a simplified route where each client just has one project. They have one list of tasks, and you don't need to do any grouping or filtering. So it's more of a simplified approach. However, you only need to build one portal in Zapier to allow any number of clients, I think up to 200 at this point, access that portal and only see the tasks, documents, and things they need to see. So that is the simplified version. Then there is the more advanced version, and that's where you have clients who have multiple projects with lots of tasks and maybe even multiple team members for those clients who need to access the portal. That advanced way of building allows you to filter by projects. However, if you go that route, you do need to build a client portal in Zapier for each of those major clients. So it doesn't behave exactly like an app where you just build the app and every client under the sun can just use that one thing you build. You do have to sort of duplicate a client portal for each client. So 2 different routes, depending on where you want to go. Feel free to skip ahead to that particular section. Again, a simple client portal where there's maybe just one project and a list of tasks. You build it once in Zapier, multiple clients can access it. Or the advanced version where you have multiple projects for each client, and you're going to have to build out a client portal or at least duplicate it for each client you have. Let's look at the tables that make up the simple client portal. I mapped it out in Canvas here so you can see there are 3 main tables. This gives the client portal those bones and the structure. We have tasks. This is sort of the meat of the portal so that a client can see what either they need to do or what you're going to be doing for them. We drop this down, you see all the tasks fields here. And then we have documents, whether this is, invoices, the contract, or actual deliverables, whatever it might be, that's going to be held in the documents table. We can see the fields there. And then lastly, help requests. So any help requests that come in are going to be stored. These don't show up in the client portal for the client to see what they've submitted. This is just attached to a form. The requests are stored so that you can go in and look at those requests if you need to in the table. So let's just take a quick look at each of these tables. In Canvas, let's go into the tasks table and take a look. You can see we have the name, we have a drop down with the different statuses, due date, description. Whether it's complete or not, we need this checkbox for the checklist component that we'll see in a minute in the interface. And then the client email address. Super important to have that so it can be locked down. The next one is documents. So let's look at that one. Here you just have a name, description, a link to the actual document, and again, the client email address so we can lock it down. Of course, for any of these tables, you can add and customize whatever you want, but this is the basic setup that's going to get you what you need. And then lastly is the help requests, and that's going to just populate with the different form fields that you can see here in the canvas. Now that we've looked at the tables and the bones, let's look at the interface pages. So back in Canvas, I've mapped this out just above the tables. We can see their corresponding interface pages. So we have the tasks page. It's going to show all the tasks. Documents page shows the documents. And then there is a Get Help page with the form that's going to feed into the help requests page. All right, so let's jump into the interface and look at these different components. So first, we'll look at the tasks page. This has a media component, which is just an image that I've uploaded. I had AI create this one. Of course, you can add whatever you want here. You can add a public URL or upload it directly from your computer. This is a text component where you can use Markdown here to stylize it, make it look different, also add in links. You'll see here also there's this option for parameters that allows you to change things in the actual URL address bar so that this text will read the URL and change depending on what's in the URL. You don't really need to know about it for this simple portal. And then down below, we have the task list. And so when we add this into the interface, there's a lot of different permissions you can select. And also when people click into the checklist item, they're going to have options to see different detail fields. And this is all pulled from the tasks table. The piece that you're really going to want to see, and which I mentioned earlier, is the data piece. And this is where you need to add the filter for the client email address to be the current user. And that's going to make sure it's locked down so that no other client sees tasks for some other client. Super important to do that. You can also set up actions. And so I have a Zapier that we're going to get to later on. You can also have actions based on when an item is created or updated, and you can have that do various things. So that's the checklist component. You can also see completed. We can look at that real quick so you can see how it looks for a logged in user. Here I am logged in, and then you can see the checklist down here. So let's say this one's ready to be checked off. Go ahead and check that, and then that will move down into the completed section here that I can look at. And then these checklist items, if I click in, I can see the item details. All right, back in Canvas, we're gonna close out the task page, and then we're gonna look at the documents page. It's pretty similar to the tasks page. It's gonna have a text field up top. And then instead of a checklist component, it has a actual table component. Again, this is pulled straight from the documents table. And a similar thing applies where you want the filter to be client email address from the table matches the user who is logged in or the current user. The other components that are backed by a table can be found here. You have a Kanban view if you have different statuses for things and you want to drag and drop cards. That's backed by a table. And then, of course, the table and the checklist component. The team is working on more and more components that are backed by tables. When they do that, those components become very valuable because you can filter them down to particular users, just like we're doing in this portal. When you start doing that, what you build in Zapier becomes more and more like an app. All right, back in Canvas, we'll look at the last major page here, which is the Get Help page with the form. We're going to open that page. On the Get Help page, we have that media component for an image, a text field, and this is where you can actually put in a parameter that says current user's name. And so that will render for the user who is logged in. And then we have a form here, and this form is built with conditional logic. So when they go to fill it out, the first thing they're going to see is just this initial drop down. That makes it way less intimidating. They can choose what they need help with, and depending on what they choose, the other fields will show up. This just looks like going into a particular field and setting up this logic in the logic tab. Now we need, let's look at urgency. That's the one we want to look at that has logic. You say, hey, when this looks like scheduling a call, show the urgency field so we can get that information from the client who's filling this out. The email is here, but you're not going to actually see the email the email field in the form. And the reason why is because we already know their email from them logging in. So we put the default value as the current user And so that will log in the table. Also, when you run a Zap, you're going to see who's actually filling out the form. That'll show up as well as a user email. But this just stores it in the table so we have access to that. And we can actually hide this from the form so that the user never even sees it. So what this looks like live is this. So we're here to help, then my name. And then here's the conditional logic that'll show up, schedule a call, it'll show urgency, and then we fill this out, and then we click submit. When we click submit there, then that's gonna show up over here in the help requests table. And you can see here the email address is logged. That way we know who's filling out the form. Back in the interface, there's just one last page I'm gonna show you, which is this welcome page. When they log in, they'll show up here. It's gonna say, hey, welcome to your portal. You can give their name. And it also includes a button here. So you can throw in a button wherever you want in the portal and connect it to a Zap. The use case here, right, is someone just logs in. They just want a quick update. When they click this button, it'll run a Zap and go to the various systems and get whatever data might be beneficial for this client. That's kind of that's up to you to decide, and then it'll send them an email. So this button, you configure how it looks, and then you set up an action, show a notification, and you can also start a Zap. All right, let's look at the advanced client portal or the multi-project portal. This portal is going to be best for clients who have multiple projects. And maybe those clients have multiple people on their team who need to log in. And so for those types of clients, you want to build out a client portal just for them in Zapier. So if you had multiple clients, you'd build out multiple client portals. The reason being is that they might have multiple projects, lots of tasks, and you need to be able to really filter that down and make it easy for people to see. For this portal, there's a home page, and they get to select which project they want to view. So maybe website design, you click view details. This will throw us into the project details screen. And from here, we can see project details like assigned team members or whatever, or any other information you want to include about the project. You can see all the tasks for that project and all the associated documents. They can go back and select another project if they want to change that up, or if they want to view all of their tasks for every single project they're working on with you, then they'll see it all right here. They can click in and see the details and check them off as they're done. Also, they can view all documents in its own page here. That'll show for every single project in their project list. They'll have one Get Help page where they'll be able to fill out a form and decide what they want to do. They can schedule a call. Of course, this is all customizable. Maybe they want to request project hours update, then they would choose a project and submit that off. But that's the gist of this multi-project or advanced client portal. All right, let's look at the tables, the bones that make up this portal. There are 4 tables that you'll need. One is the project list. That's going to have all the relevant details about the project, tasks for each of the projects, documents for each of the projects. And then lastly, a help request table. That's just for you. Anytime they submit a help request, they store that in a table. So let's look at each one of these real quickly. The project's very simple. You're going to have a name of the project, a status that you set up that has different selectable items that you can add or remove or change, an assigned team member, and then you could add any other field that might be helpful for a client to look at for a particular project. Maybe a scheduled due date or something else like that. Now, once you have these projects, each project's going to have its own set of tasks. So we move over to the task list. We're going to have name of a task, status, very similar to a project, a due date, description, and then here's where you have the actual project selector. So you can choose from the projects in that project table. And the way this is set up is that it's a drop down, and the source of the drop down is from that project's table. We also have here project name text. And so there's a Zap in the background, doesn't cost a task or anything like that, but it basically takes the project and puts just a plain text version of it. This allows just for easy filtering when you're in interfaces. I'll show you how to set up this Zap in the Zaps section, but it's not too complex. The last field here is just a checkbox field. This is specifically for that task or checklist component in the portal. Now, you could have this checklist be for the client, so a checklist that they need to fill out. Maybe it's an onboarding portal or something like that. Or this could be a checklist that you personally fill out and they just have eyes on it. However you want to do that. You could also have a mix and have one task list be for the client, one task list is yours. You can create as many as you'd like and filter them down. We'll get into interfaces here in a bit to look more closely at that. Two more tables. One is the documents table. You have a name, description. You'll have a link to the document. You will have to house that document likely somewhere else, maybe Google Drive, Box, something like that. Just put a link here. The date added, and again, the similar project drop-down field that also creates just a plain text field of that project name for easy filtering in the portal. Going back into Canvas, the last bit is those help requests. If we want to look at this table, we can see all the fields here from Canvas, or we can open it up. This takes directly from the form and interfaces. And as clients or whoever fills out the form, they're going to show up here. You can set a Zap to notify you anytime something comes through, or make a pretty complex Zap. If they ever want to maybe check their hours, you can have a Zap go to your hour tracking app and pull in, do some calculations, and get back to the client with that information. There's a checkbox here for you to manage when you've responded to things. So those are the bones for a portal. Next, we're going to look at the actual interface, start taking these bones, put some skin on them, allow users to interact with them. We can see all of the tables down below in this canvas. We just looked at that. And then all of the interface pages that those tables feed into and provide structure for. So the projects table, tasks table, and documents table all feed into the project details screen. And also the tasks and documents and even help requests have their own pages as well. They feed directly into those pages. So let's just go into interfaces, go page by page, and I'll show you how I set everything up. So we'll start with this home page. This is just for project selection. And so I have a form here that has one drop-down field, the project drop-down field. The source is a table, and it's the projects table. The selection field is going to be the name of the project. This is all pretty straightforward. However, it's powerful in the back end. Here's what you need to know. When you select a project here and click View Details, it's going to navigate to the project details screen and filter everything on that screen. Now, the way to do that is to create this reference ID called project. This reference ID is something that will tell interfaces to pull in the project that's selected into the URL of the interface page. And from that URL, it will then tell the project detail screen how to filter everything. So these are called params or parameters, URL parameters. They're things you can just attach onto the URL. So I'll show you how this works. This one's called project. And so when we set up the action for this form field, we're going to have it navigate to a page, the project details page. And then the most important thing is to select send data to this page. What that means is it's going to take the project that you select in this dropdown and throw it into the URL. That's what it's doing. So when we send data to the page, we'll filter that page based on what's in the URL. So let's go look at how that's set up. In project details, we have a table here, a checklist here, and then another table here. They don't show anything because they're filtered right now. They're filtered by that project param in the URL bar. And so all we need to do is when we add a table component here, and anytime you want to add a component, you just click add component, you'll see table. You can select the table from this list when you add a new table. So I've done that for this top one. The table is the projects table. So you can see it here. Now the filter this is where it's going to look at the URL bar and filter for whatever's put in there. So we've set up a filter to say, hey, the name of the project needs to exactly match the parameter from the URL bar. And so this handy code here is what you need to input in. If you ever forget the format for this, every single text field that you put in or text component you put in has a guide for that markdown right here. And so you can put in these parameters wherever you want throughout the interface page, and it'll look at the URL bar and use what's in there to change the text or filter for a certain project, whatever. So you can see here, even now, I've put a parameter to say, hey, that project parameter, and remember that's from the drop down back in the project selector screen. That is what we want to show as the text here. If nothing comes in for the URL bar, we're going to have a default. It's going to say project details. That's why we see that there. So the table's filtered. The checklist is also filtered. You can see here in data, you have a filter. The project name text exactly matches what's in the parameter. And again, the documents table, same thing here. Project name text exactly matches the parameter from the URL bar. So I'm going to show you how this works. Let's move this. We're going to move my screen down here so you can see the URL bar. We'll go back to home. We'll actually open this up. I've already logged in, but you'll see here the URL bar. And when I select website design and click view details, it's going to navigate to the project details screen and send the data. And you can see here, this is how it looks. A question mark is tagged onto the end of the URL with the reference ID from that project selector, and it says project equals website design. That feeds this text component to say website design. It filters the table to show only website design, filters all the tasks to make sure they are all website design. You can see here, there's the project. And then lastly, the documents to make sure that those are also all website design projects. I don't have the field show up here, but in the back end, that's what it's filtering down for. And so if I were to remove this parameter from the URL bar, you'll see that nothing will show up. This goes back to the default project details. This says, hey, we're trying to filter by the URL param, but there's nothing there, so it's not going to show anything. It's not going to show any tasks or documents. So what someone needs to do is actually go choose another project. This button sends them back to the home screen, and then they choose something else here and click view details. That sends them back in here with that URL param. See, now it's logo and design, or redesign. That shows up here. This is filtered. This is filtered. This is filtered. So let's just say someone was in another page. Maybe they're looking at all tasks. This is going to show everything for every project. And then they go back to project details. This isn't going to show anything. So that experience isn't awesome. Maybe what I would want to do is actually hide this project details screen from the nav bar. So they only can toggle to the home page. And so if I want to do that, I can go back here, can go into navigation, and I'm just going to remove project details from the home bar or the nav bar. Now, when they go back in, let's refresh this. Yeah, now it's gone. That's the experience I want to have. So website design, view details, it'll navigate to the project details screen. They want to choose another project, they have to go back. If they're on some other screen, then they're going to need to go back into home and choose another project if they want to see specific details for a project. That is probably the most complex piece of this portal that you need to know how to do. Now let's go through and just look at the different components that I've set up. We've already looked at the home page and that project selector. Now we can see at the top here, this is just a button component. We can label it, change up all of the ways it looks, primary, secondary, the alignment, and then most importantly, the action. And so we can have this navigate to a page. Of course, that's what it does. But you could also open external URL. You could show a notification, and you could also trigger a zap. You could do something like a button that says, get an update. And you put that in this client portal. Whenever the client wants an update, they're going to click that button. That could go run a zap, go grab a ton of information, and then send it automatically to the client or gather stuff, send you a quick ping on Slack or email, and then you could get back to them quickly. So it's almost like you could use it as an easy button in these portals to do something pretty cool. Right now, this button is just a navigational button, so we're going to put it there. This is an image. You can upload an image, or you could put in a URL. You could also add a video or the logo from the interface's branding, which we'll get to after this. And then we've already looked at this text component. You can use Markdown to make this look differently, and you can also use those parameters to change what it says based on the URL bar like we went over. Here's a table. This is going to show just the projects table. It's not sorted by anything. You can choose what columns show up here for the client. You can let them create, edit, or delete them. This is super straightforward and powered by tables. Here's a quick divider. You add in another text component here that just says tasks. And then here is a checklist component. You could add the header there if you want, but I like it centered up here above as its own text component. You can sort by different fields in the table. You can allow users to create, edit, do all these different things. And so this is where you need to decide, is this task list going to be for the client to fill out, in which we definitely want them to be able to edit and view completed, do all that? Or is this for you to give them visibility into what you're doing? If that's the case, maybe you'd want to turn off edit, and this is something you would just mark complete, maybe in the table in the back end. So for now, we'll just leave this on. And then there's the documents. This is powered by that documents table. You can sort by date added. Again, different columns you can choose to show up here. And then the content user permissions are available here. This likely would be, contracts, maybe an actual deliverable that you want to throw in here. In that case, maybe you don't want them to be able to edit. You just want them to be able to see things, click links in, and view the documents. Quick look at this live. Let's go to website redesign. They'll see all the information for the project. Here are the tasks. If I wanted to complete a task, I would do that. And then those show up in completed. I'll unmark that for now. And then documents here, they would be able to see the links. If right now I do allow the client to edit, so this is what it would look like to edit, but then they would click out to see those documents. All right, so let's look at the other pages here. We've got an all tasks page, and this shows you a checklist that is just simply not filtered down by anything. And so we do have a sort by project name descending. We allow people to edit all that. And so it's a full task list. You can change what shows up here. And then you can also add zaps and actions to when someone updates a checklist item. Right now, there's a zap here that we'll get to later when we go through all the zaps and automation for this portal. All documents, very similar, except instead of a checklist component, this is showing a table component, unfiltered, so they can see everything here. You know, if they had tons of different projects, they could search for records, maybe just search for the project itself. What this looks like is here, just data that comes in without a filter, a custom sort that I put on there. But of course, a user could change the sort when they're here. And so let's say we want to look at date added. We can change that up or search for records, maybe logo redesign. Then that will show up like that. Super straightforward here. Let's look at the last page, which is the Get Help page. And this is a form. So there are some cool things about this form. It shows conditional logic. So it's just a simple, non-intimidating question at the beginning. What do you need help with? They get to choose from a list. When they do that, other fields do show up based on what's selected. So let's look at how that's set up. Here's an image. We got the text component, right? And then here is that form with those conditionally rendered fields. This can be pretty powerful depending on how you want to set it up. The way you do it is we have an email field, and that is going to be hidden. And the reason why is because clients are logging in. We already have their email address. We don't want them to fill it out. So you have this little pill here that you can add. It's current user.email. You could also do .name. Those are the two fields that are captured when you have managed users. When you add this in as the default value, every time someone fills out the form, Hidden behind the scenes, this will be captured and put into the table for you to look at. Important to have that piece in there. And then the other pieces are this initial question, what do you need help with? This is a drop down that you can decide what this says. And so this comes directly from the connected table. And so these options, when I did set that up, are listed there in the table. If you want to change that, then you can just jump over to the table and change that. And then the other fields here are conditionally rendered, and I'll show you what that looks like. You have the field, the drop down is choosing a project that's sourced from another table. Click required, sure, but then you have a logic here. And this only shows up based on previous fields and what's selected in there. So I have what do you need help with as the field it's looking at, and we're saying it is exactly this request completed project hours and update. So if that's the selected option, then this choose project field will show up and be available. You can add a whole bunch of different conditions, multiple conditions based on the previous fields. All right, so that's how you set up conditional fields. The last bit on a form is the action. So we do show a notification saying, hey, the form has been submitted. That's important to let the user know, like, hey, we received your response. And then there's a zap. This is a notification zap that we'll look at in a bit. All right, the other piece that you're gonna wanna change is access and users. If you don't change this, then your interface will be available to anyone who has the link. That's how it starts out. So you definitely don't want that. You could do anyone with a password and do it that way, but you're not going to be able to get that user data, just the email address of whoever's logging in. And I think that can be pretty important, especially if you have a client with multiple team members and you want to know who's submitting this form to get help. You're going to want managed user. Could do one-time passcode. I like advanced login. That way they can do the magic link that they can click when it's sent to their email, or they could log in via Google. That's by far the easiest. You can set a CAPTCHA here too if you need that, but a lot of times this is all you're going to need. And then you click manage and you can choose to add users directly here with a name and an email. They're not going to be automatically emailed, so you do want to make sure that you let them know, send them your own email about access and the link to this. This can be automated. And so if you do have another system or a process for giving users access to a portal, you can add a step in a Zap that says add user to this client portal and make that whole process automated. All right, that's it for the advanced multi-project portal. That was a lot to cover, so feel free to watch this through again. We're going to look at all of the different interface settings with branding and custom domain, other things like that. And then lastly, we're going to look at Zaps, automation, and round things out. So in Zapier interfaces, you've made the skin to your app, but you might need to change how it looks. Throw on a hat, change the color of the shirt. So this is how you do that. I'll also show you all the other settings that you may want to adjust for your portal or anything else you might build in interfaces. The first thing to look at is navigation, and this is where you have that nav bar across the top. When we go here, you can display it on all the pages. You can include the logo in the nav bar if you want, and then you decide what those links are, whether they open in a new tab or not. When you add a new link, you can actually enter in any URL you want. It's not just limited to interfaces, but of course, you're going to want to choose your pages there to make it easier for your users. After navigation, we've already seen it, access and users. This is where you can manage all of them. You also can set up a Zap or an automation to add or remove users too. You also have CAPTCHA here if you need to have that. Pretty straightforward. There's this piece tracking. You can actually add in Google Analytics tracking ID and track this just like you would a website. This can be pretty helpful if you want to know how often someone is logging in or viewing different pages. You can add a custom domain. I've done this for a couple of them. It's actually pretty simple. When you do add in a domain, like let's say I put this as portal.brycevernon.com. Once you do that, it basically just says, hey, go into your DNS provider and you just add a CNAME. So if you're adding a subdomain like I just did, you just add a CNAME record and have it point to this address here. with like host name, I think it's what it's called. There'll be another field where you actually put in the subdomain. Once you do that, it honestly takes like a minute, and then it updates and you're set to go. I've also made one for a domain itself, not a subdomain. It's pretty simple too. The directions here are straightforward, but Zapier support can really help with this to make it easier for you. But once you do it, super easy to set up. I'm going to remove this for now. Next piece is branding. This is where you're going to upload your logo, give it a default height, and a favicon for the browser. You can turn off the built-on Zapier label if you want. Going over to theme, you can change the page background to whatever color you want, or it gives you some options here, subtle backgrounds to make it easier to match your brand. We'll keep it green for now. Primary colors and some other stuff. So feel free to explore this, change things up. The last bit here is your settings. You're gonna have a name. If you don't have a custom domain set up, you can actually add in a subdomain. Once they've been claimed, and then you choose a homepage. The last bit here is connections. It'll show you whenever you're on a page, what other Zapier products this interface is connected to and is using. So we can see here there's a Zap, and you can navigate to it. This is for the button click when someone says get an update. This is the Zap that runs there. Those are the major settings. The only other one is page options, where you're going to see page name, title, and URL, and whether it's included in the navigation. All right, that's it for interfaces. Now we're going to go to the final piece, the brains, the zaps, the automation. So we'll take a look at that. Whether you've built out a simple client portal or an advanced portal that's multi-project, there's one common zap, and it's pretty simple. This just notifies you anytime someone submits a help request. Now, if you're using the advanced portal, there's a bunch that I'll cover in a moment, but first, this simple zap. And after this, we're gonna go into a bunch of Zap ideas that you could implement. So first, just the nuts and bolts, the brain behind these portals. So form submission created, that is the major trigger when someone fills out that get help page. You can create this Zap straight from interfaces by going to the page that has the form. And in this form, you'll go to actions. From here, you start a Zap. The first time you do this, it'll say create a Zap, something like that. You'll click that and it'll create a Zap with the trigger of form submit. So you can see here, it's linked up. So when we go back in here, we test the trigger, and that's going to get all the test data that you might need from the form. You can see it all here. This is just dummy data that we can use. The next step is very simply just sending an outbound email. So you could use Gmail for this, or whatever app you want to use to send yourself an email. So if I were to map that in, the different types, what project do you need help with, I could add in all the different fields or link directly to the table that has all the requests there for me to look at, change up the name, and whatever else. You could add in logic here. You could only get an email if the urgency is high. If they're wanting to schedule a call, you could look at your calendar, see if there's an open spot. Lots more here you could work with, but that's it for the logic behind the portal. Especially the simple portal, this is all that's needed. Pretty straightforward. Now, if you built out the advanced portal, let's look at some other logic that's necessary for that to work. The big piece here is just making sure that the project that's selected for a particular task or document, that a text field is created for that project. That text field allows the interface to filter by those parameters in the URL address bar and is really important. And so we have Zap set up to handle that logic for us in the back end. Anytime a new task is added, it goes ahead and updates that text field. And then if a task changes, the task project changes, then it also goes and updates that field. The same is true of the document. So we can see what that looks like by going into one of the tables. So we'll go into the tasks table and we'll go over here. We'll see these two fields are linked up by those zaps. Anytime the project changes, so if I click website design and change this project, then this text field is going to update here in a second. There we go. And so if we change it back, logo redesign, that's also going to change back to logo redesign. It's a small detail, but is very important to make sure that the interface filters down by project and works the way we want it to work. This same Zap setup is in the documents table. It does exactly the same thing. So we'll just look at one set of those Zaps for the tasks to show you what that looks like. So first one, when there's a new or updated record in the tasks table, that's when we're going to run this Zap. Continue there. The filter is that project name text field does not exist. The last step, it's going to update the record. It's going to update that specific project name text field from the project that is selected. And the last Zap is when there's an update to the actual project for the task. Maybe there needs to be a change. Then that is selected here. You see project as the trigger field. That will trigger anytime the project is updated. It will go through and update that project name text field with whatever project is selected. All right, so you would set up the same Zaps for documents, and that is all you need for the Zaps to power this portal, give it the brains it needs. Next, we'll talk through Zap ideas, other ways you could add automation into this portal to go above and beyond and connect your entire tech stack. So let's take a look at some other ideas that you could implement using Zaps, some other ways you can automate with this portal. Hopefully this will inspire you, give you some ideas on how to take this to the next level. So I made a list here in Canvas. The first one, you could have a start a new project form. When a client fills this out, you could set up a Zap to add a new project into that project's table. You can set it to pending. You could draft up a project brief with AI according to your guidelines. You could send it to your team for review and do anything else you want to do with that. There's a button in the simple portal if you want to look at that. Basically, it's like an easy button, and that button could go get an update on the entire project, or in the forum, if someone wanted an update, then they could select that, then have a Zap go check Harvest or some time tracking app, check Asana for your projects, and wherever you manage that, you can use AI to summarize that, make sure it looks clean and simple for the client, and then you could actually send that out, automate that entire process. You could also have a book call page. Instead of a form that sends you some information, you can add an embed component in interfaces. So you could embed Calendly directly into the portal. And then from there, Calendly has a bunch of automation that you could build out for emails, things like that, or in Zapier, set up Zaps to take those bookings and automate the process from there. You could have a form where they could submit support tickets and even review support tickets. You know, a Zap could add that to Zendesk for your team to manage, or if you're just in email, then that can send it to email. You could create a new table in the portal to house all those tickets and do a whole bunch there. And then lastly, if you did have milestones completed, then from here you could send an invoice. So after a major step in the project is complete, and maybe that's when you send invoices, then you can automate that process. Maybe from the tables in the back end, you could click a button to go create the invoice based on what's been done. A whole lot of ideas there. This just scratches the surface. Hopefully that gets your wheels turning. So much you could do with Zapier.